Good morning, church. It's good to be with you guys today. I've got to share some good news. Some very, very good news, as a matter of fact. And this is just what I have written down, what I remember, okay? So previous Wednesday before last, then on Sunday, then on Tuesday, then on Thursday, and then supposed to be again today, people have been baptized into Christ. I want you to know that. Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome. Now let's go to Scripture and talk about some problems. All right, 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, deals with two problems. It's the problem with the world, and it's the problem with you and I. And so that's what I want to get to. But let's start with a little illustration. What do they say? For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That would be Newton's third law, right? Right? Which makes perfect sense. You know, if I were to take this podium and just kind of chuck it over there, you would expect to hear a bang, a loud crash, right? Because for that action, that weight's got to disperse. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. However, when I think about this, I also find this to be true. I know it's not a law per se, but I find this to be true in relationships too. Have you ever noticed that? If you say something kind of mild to someone else, generally speaking, you would expect a mild response. Hey, how are you? No, I'm good. How's it going? Something like that. But if you say something really harsh or really mean, then you will probably get a different response, right? I mean, generally speaking, I'm not saying it's true all the time, but generally speaking, you will get a different sort of response. Why? Because what you said was actually way more harsh. And a lot of times you can even gauge it by your response, right? You know what I'm talking about? Based on the way someone responds to me, I can tell, okay, I must have said something a little bit more harsh. So an ill example, I try to say illustration and example together. An ill example, man, it sounds bad. Anyhow, you get the idea. So if we were illustrating this in the physical realm, if I were to walk up to one of you and just kind of poke you on the shoulder, you might kind of wonder, okay, what was that for? Why'd you do that? You wouldn't think much of it if I just poked you in the shoulder. But I want you to imagine the same amount of force, same finger, and I poked you in the eyeball. The response would be a little bit different, right? Why would the response be a little bit different? What are you doing? What? Why would your response be different? Well, because that's more sensitive. Yeah, I mean, I use the same amount of force, but you poke somebody in the eye, it's way more sensitive there, it's going to hurt. You're going to get a worse reaction from them. So my question is, when you say something relatively mild to them, why would they give you a terrible response back? So let's say someone had a little bit of lettuce stuck in their teeth, and you try to be the polite person and actually say, hey, by the way, you got a little something. I got a big gap here, so I never get anything stuck. It's great for me. But you guys, you got problems with that, right? So you get this little lettuce stuck in your teeth, and then you say to someone who's got that stuck there, you say, hey, you got a little piece of something. Well, what if they start cussing you out? Right? What if they curse you out? How dare you say that? I think it's safe to say that this conversation is not really about lettuce, is it? Right? It's not really about lettuce. You can expect there's some sort of deep trauma there, right? There's something. I don't know if it's a childhood issue. I don't know if it's tooth problems that they've had throughout the years or what. But you can tell there's obviously some sort of deeper trauma going on. And you can gauge that by their reaction to the mild thing you said, right? Does that make sense? All right, hold that thought because I think that's going to help us as we get into 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter. 2 Corinthians, the 4th chapter begins this way. Therefore, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart. Rather, we have renounced secret, shameful ways. We do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. And even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing. The God of this age, that's not talking about God, that's talking about the enemy here, right? The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. For what we preach is not ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts, to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. So Paul here is talking about this good news of Jesus, this wonderful message of Jesus. But how does the world react to that message? We read their reaction in verse 3 and verse 4. What did it describe? It says it's like there's a veil covering their eyes. It's like a veil, a blindfold, covering their face so they just can't see it. Well, what would that look like in the real world, right? Today, what are the veils? Well, there are all sorts of different reasons why people don't come to Christ. There are all sorts of veils. There might be the veil of a past trauma that they can't get over. There might be the veil of an upbringing that made them so biased against all things God, all things Jesus. The veil might be money. You're just chasing after money. The veil might be fun or success or fame or some other thing that you're just too distracted going after that there's no time, there's no way I'm going to focus on Jesus. He's going to get in the way of that, right? All sorts of different veils blinding people from the message. But it doesn't stop there. It's not that they're just blind to the message, okay? So if there's a room that was pitch black and I walked into it and I'm like, whoa, this room's dark, I would probably do the same thing that you would do. I would look for a light switch. I would probably get out my phone, find the little flashlight app, which isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, technology. Find a little flashlight app and like, all right, there's got to be a light switch around here somewhere. What I wouldn't do is stand there for 10 minutes and cuss out this darkness. You stupid darkness, you have dare. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that, right? That's an unnatural, that's a weird response. You wouldn't do something like that. You would just go look for the fix. The world, however, has a different sort of response to Jesus, and their response indicates something. Let's see this in the coming verses, okay? We're going to go to verse 7, and it says some good things, but I want us to be perceptive. I want us to pick up all of this. Okay. It says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay. Oh, that probably deserves a whole other sermon there. I believe jars of clay is talking about human bodies, and it's this parallel of this awesome, perfect, eternal gospel, good news of Jesus. And then it's housed where? Well, we humans in our fragile bodies, right? God has invested that wonderful message in us, showing how great it is. Wonderful. We have this treasure in jars of clay that show this all-surpassing power is from God, not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be revealed in our body. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may also be revealed in our mortal body. So then, death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. Now, there's a lot of wonderful things that these verses say. We're going to get to some of that a little bit later, right? We're going to get to some of the positives, but I don't want you to ignore the negative things that were said there. When you choose to follow Jesus, right, you as a Christian, there are going to be people in this world that they're veiled. They do not understand, and it's not as though it's neutral. It's like, oh, well, I can't see, so I'll just ignore that. No. A lot of them are going to take it a step further, just like these verses say. There was a progression we just read. When you read it again, you'll see it. The progression of this reaction of the world, right? It goes from least to worst, and you read about it in these verses. What does the world do? What does the world do to you? Well, first thing it says is we as Christians are hard-pressed. That's the Greek word that means crowded. When it talks about the crowds that were crowding around Jesus, this is the word that it uses for people crowding around him. All right, so crowded. Then it's the word for perplexed. That means anxious or you're at a loss. We're persecuted. That is typically to pursue someone in order to hurt them, to cause pain. Struck down, that's a word that means knocked over, or sometimes it can mean you are hurt or injured badly. And then given over to death. That's what Jesus suffered. That's what you know what that means, right? That's not comfortable. It's not comfortable at all. You can see the progression here. This is what happens when you live for Christ. This is what you can expect. This is the world's reaction. Boy, what an overreaction. And by the way, this isn't just theory. This isn't just, that's how all Christians feel, whatever. You could test this out. People have, but you could test this out. I'll give you one example. All right? An example that may not be safe in every room, but I'll go ahead and say it because God's word teaches it, okay? You could get on your social media account and you could post this short little phrase, abortion is murder. You could post that little phrase on your social media account. If you did that, you know what you can expect to happen? Immediately, your post is going to be hard-pressed with comments. You are going to be crowded with all sorts of comments and voices about what you just said. Some of the comments will really perplex you. It will really make you wonder, what? Why did I, whoa, what's with this response? Some of those comments will go a step further and they will insult you or deliberately try to persecute you. Now, fortunately for you and I, most of us probably aren't that famous. Our post won't reach enough people to get to the real crazies out there. But if it does, if the post reaches the right people, do you know what you can expect? You can expect people coming for you. Someone somewhere will come for you to physically harm you. All because I stood up for the unborn? I stood up for the baby? Yeah. This isn't just theory. This is what you live. And I'm wondering why such an intense reaction. Well, here's why. You didn't just poke the world in the shoulder by a comment like that. You poked him in the eye. You realize that? This isn't just some topic that's out there. When you make a statement like this, you are challenging someone's view of life. You are challenging someone's view of sex. You are challenging the way in which they live their life, and you are making them feel guilty of something. You are doing a number of things that is just hurts. And they don't like it. There's something important that I hope we get. I really do. The world's okay with you liking Jesus. And I would go a step further and say the world is okay with you loving Jesus too. I have the privilege every so often of spending some time around people who are not Christian. As a matter of fact, I would say they're almost as far away as you get from being Christian, right? They're the pagan side of the spectrum, right? Far away from Christianity. You know what's funny to me? Time and time and time again, I talk about Jesus. They don't mind Jesus. A lot of them love Jesus. Oh yeah, Jesus, great guy, said some wonderful things. They have other problems, but they love Jesus. That's great. The world didn't have a problem with Jesus, you loving him. But if you decide I'm going to live for Jesus, they have a huge problem. They're okay with you loving Jesus. That's fine. That's cool. We kind of love him too. He did some good things. But if you, as a Christian, say, no, I don't just love Jesus. I live for him. We live for Jesus. Suddenly, the world has a problem. You have, in essence, poked the world in the eye. Because if Jesus is Lord, that means we humans aren't. If Jesus is God, if Jesus is King, that means we don't have that position anymore. We don't have that authority anymore. And all of a sudden, you have challenged their view of everything. Their view of life, their view of sex, their view of gender, their view of all sorts of, their view of money, what they're going to do with their life. I mean, every single area of life has now been challenged because Jesus is King, and that means that we humans aren't. So Christian, this is what I want you to understand. When the world attacks you, when they come after you and you go through these stages, it's not really you. They have a problem with Jesus. They have a problem with Jesus. They want to keep Jesus down here, but when you make him Lord, it's like, whoa, no, they have a big problem with that. You're just the messenger. I'm sorry they're shooting the messenger. I really am. It kind of stinks sometimes, right? But it's not really about you. Don't internalize that. Don't personalize that too much, because this is about Jesus' lordship. That's the problem of the world. But the problem doesn't stop there. The problem doesn't stop there. See, you and I have a problem too, and that's also what these verses talk about, okay? What is the problem that we have as Christians? Well, God says that when you're pressed, you're not crushed. When you're perplexed, you're not in despair. When you're persecuted, you're not abandoned. You're struck down, but you're not destroyed. And even though you've been given over to death, life is at work in you. I really, really love the way this chapter finishes up. So let's skip to verse 16. I want you to see how Paul rounds up this chapter here. Verse 16, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes, not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. You and I as Christians have a different problem. We won't stop being joyful. We won't go down. We won't die. We will continue to make Jesus Lord, and we will continue to live this life no matter what sort of reaction we get, because we just can't help it. We are just being renewed constantly, and I love it so much. I love it so much. I was in an adoption support group a few weeks back, and in the roundtable discussion, somebody brought up really bad they were just talking about these really bad cases of abuse and neglect and trauma where the brain damage in the child is so severe that they have to be institutionalized. It's so sad, but there are unfortunately a lot of extreme cases like that where the damage is just so much, the brain, the development's so gone that there is no real recovery from that, right? So they have to be in an institution for their life. We were talking about that, and it reminded me of a man named David Wood. David Wood is a guy that I saw his testimony on YouTube. Very, very powerful testimony. He is a psychopath. Now, there's a lot that I don't know about. Evidently, there's a difference between sociopath and psychopath and stuff. But definitely, psychopath is a bad thing. Very, very bad thing, right? He doesn't feel the emotions that he should, doesn't care about the emotions that he should, that normal people would, experience. So when he was a young man, he attempted to kill his father with a hammer. And he thought he did. He thought he was successful. Come to find out later, they were able to reconstruct his father's skull and save him. But the craziest thing about that to me was that he didn't have a problem with his father at all. He didn't care. It was almost as though like he was bored one day and thought, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And he tried to just kill his father like that. So obviously, they locked him away in prison, as they should. And guys like that, I would tend to think, all right, lock them up and throw away the key, because we can't have a flourishing society with people like that in it, right? That's what I would assume. But in prison, Dave met some other people, and one of the people that he met there, I don't know how this guy got in or whatever, but there was a Christian in the prison system. So David immediately made a big deal to make fun of this guy, to be at odds with him, to, give him a hard time and all that. But one of the things that bothered David so much is every time he tried to insult this guy's faith, this guy had a good response. This guy not only was modeling Christianity pretty well, but he also seemed to have studied up and knew the answers to a lot of the things that David was presenting. And that bothered David so much, because he in his kind of warped brain thought that he was the humanity 2.0. He was the better than everyone else, and he knew it, and he could crush you in debate. He could crush you in anything you want. That's what he thought, and yet he couldn't crush this Christian over and over and over again. So it was a long process. It was a long battle. It was a debate back and forth. There was a fasting battle. There was all sorts of weird stuff going on in his life. But I'll skip to the end. Eventually, David ends up becoming a believer in Jesus. Today, if you were to look for him, you would find that he is now a Christian. He's out. His dad didn't die. He was able to get out later. He is now a Christian apologist, someone who defends the faith. He has been married for about 20 years now and has multiple children, even cares for special needs kids. That doesn't make sense. I'm willing to admit that too. On a worldly level, on a basic level, that doesn't make sense. People like that shouldn't recover. So why did he? I would argue it's where he fixed his eyes. We fix our eyes not on what we see right in front of us, what is unseen. We fix our eyes on Jesus. And Christian, that's what you and I do. We keep fixing our eyes on Jesus, and if you do that, He's Lord. He's more powerful than what happens here. I don't know if any of you are piano players or not. I don't know if we have some piano players in the room, But let's suppose you're not only a piano player, but you want to be the greatest piano player in the world. You have this lofty goal of being the best piano player on planet Earth. Well, I'm here to tell you, some people, there are multiple ways of accomplishing this, right? Some people will say you just need to practice, 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 and hopefully you'll become the best. But there's another way. All you need to do is to eliminate the other piano players. Correct? If you were to eliminate, I mean, you can keep the ones that aren't that great, they're way worse than you. We'll keep them around, right? But let's eliminate all the others, and then you will be the best piano player in the world. We could follow this logic down, eliminate all the people who are better at you at everything and just leave the ones that are worse, and then you will be the best human on planet Earth. But are you any better? You're not. Would you be any happier? I don't think so. The problem the world has with Jesus is that he is number one, and so they want to just, no, making me look bad, making me get him out. If they do that, they won't be any better. And what's worse, they think it'll make them happy. It won't make you happy. It won't. But perhaps you're here as a Christian. And sometimes we as Christians let the world get to us because the fight is long. The fight is hard. I know he talks about these light and momentary troubles. Yeah, but sometimes, Paul, it doesn't feel so light. It doesn't feel so momentary. It feels so long. A lot of times we let the world's pressure get to us. And one of the things that happens is we start to water down Scripture. That's one of the signs. We first say, well, I'm not going to speak out on controversial things for a while. I'm just tired of getting beat down. I'm just tired of. And then we start to say, well, I don't know, but Jesus is loving. And we just start to make sure that Jesus doesn't seem all that controversial, that our faith doesn't seem all that controversial. We avoid battles and stuff just because we're tired. But Christian, when you do that, in essence, what you're doing is you are slowly, not quickly, but you are slowly pushing Jesus off of the throne and trying to slowly creep your way on it instead. When you water down this good news, when you minimize it, when you make it simple and easy and less what Jesus said, you aren't any better. And it won't really give you joy either. But you know what will? Fixing your eyes on Jesus. Fixing your eyes not on what is seen, not on what we're going through, but on what's unseen. So, Christian, if I could encourage you today, don't give up. Keep fixing your eyes on Jesus, because only Jesus is Lord. Only Jesus is King. And only Jesus can take care of our sin. So would you take a few moments to pray silently and to reflect on the fact that Jesus is Lord and that Jesus as Lord died in our place? And after you've had a moment to do that, come to one of the tables and receive the Lord's Supper.